All right, energy source, non-renewable, renewable, and inexhaustible. This is what we're going to be talking about a little bit, and you'll be doing a presentation on different types of energy sources, and I'll go over that assignment here in just a second. So energy is the ability to do work, as you probably remember from your science class from long ago. Energy sources are defined as either non-renewable, renewable, or inexhaustible. And the sun is the original source of almost all energy here on Earth, So basically, we get most of all of our energy that we have has come from the sun. So non-renewable energy sources. So these are sources that cannot be replaced once used. So once you use them, you're done with them. Once we run out, we have no more. So those are your fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas. So those are all your non-renewables. Alternative energy is any fuel that is not identified as a fossil fuel. So alternative energy, which is non-renewable, also would be something as uranium, which we use in our nuclear power plants. So nuclear energy is fission. We also have fusion that they're developing. So fission is what we currently use. And really, if you haven't realized it, pretty much all of our energy sources, and I'll even go back to this, how do we get electricity from coal? We burn it. Why do we burn it? How does that make electricity for us? Well, we boil water, which creates steam, which turns a turbine, which turns a generator, and then we get electricity. Same thing with oil, same thing with natural gas. And guess what a big nuclear power plant does? You get the rods close to each other, they react to each other, it creates heat, they boil water, creates steam, which then turns a turbine, which then turns a generator, which makes electricity. So basically, a nuclear power plant boils water. That's what it does. And from that, it can make electricity. So it says about 20% of the world's electricity comes from nuclear power. I believe that's, I need to really update that data. I believe it's more than that at this point. There's countries like France, which are like 98% total nuclear energy now. So, which kind of seems like an odd country that's pure nuclear, but they are. And so I think it's a little bit larger than 20% of the world's electricity comes from nuclear power plant. Here in Texas, we have 4 nuclear power plants. We have 2 on the table to be built. So they put us up to 6 nuclear power plants here in Texas. So we do have a few here in Texas that are close by. Renewable energy sources. These are sources that can be replaced once used, such as animals, food, and then biomass, such as your biofuels like ethanol and methanol. Okay, there's some pretty cool things that some farms and stuff have done, especially like with the methanol. Like there's a dairy farm up north somewhere, Indiana, Illinois, Idaho, one of those ice states, has a big dairy farm, and their entire farm, and I mean it's like, I want to say he has something like 3,000 or 4,000 head of cattle that are milking cows. And from their waste, he puts them in vats and creates methanol and powers generators. And his whole farm is powered off of cow poop, basically. And in fact, he makes so much energy, he sells his energy back to the grid. So he makes more energy than he uses off of that. Now it took him a while to get there, but it's kind of a neat. I watched a documentary on it, so some pretty cool stuff there. And like if you go to Brazil, all their cars are run on almost pure ethanol, which they make from sugarcane, which you have like a 95% turnover with sugarcane into ethanol. So like you have like a 5% waste. When we make ethanol out of corn, huh? Yeah. When we make ethanol out of corn, it's like a 50% turnover. So we have 50% of the corn we use is wasted when trying to make it into ethanol. So it's a high waste when you make it out of corn. But out of sugarcane, it's not 100%. Nothing's ever 100%, but it's like 95 or something like that. That's why in Brazil they grow a lot of sugarcane, but they don't have much oil, which is really odd because you think with like the Amazon rainforest, you'd have a lot of debris that has buried over millions of years and would have oil underneath there. They don't. So it's kind of odd. But anyways, hydroelectric, one of the older energy sources used by mankind. You know, you'd see in the even like old, Knight's Day, they put water wheels on rivers to turn the water wheel. Well, that's usually using hydroelectric. Well, they're not hydroelectric, but that's using hydropower to turn a water wheel to turn a grinding stone to like grind flour and stuff. So hydroelectric's pretty simple. Basically, you got to be able to create a large reservoir of water that then wants to force itself through, and so you give it a pathway which goes through and turns turbines, which turns the generator. So here we're just not boiling water to get our power. So we're just letting water flow through the turbines, and that allows us to generate the power. Really old, just kind of an expensive process usually. Building a dam that can support all that pressure of that water. There also is a tidal. So there's places in the country, like if you got on the beach, you heard of high tide, low tide. And if you're down in Texas, Florida, you probably see maybe a 2 to 3 foot tidal surge. So in other words, at low tide, the water's about 3 feet lower than it is at high tide. There's places on this planet where the tidal surge is like 20 to 30 feet. So like at low tide, it's 30 feet lower. So that'd be like the height of this building. So at low tide, you're standing on ground like we are. At high tide, the water's hitting the top of the building. So it's huge tidal surge. So they basically kind of make it. It's almost like a hydroelectric. They just build a gateway, so there's only one entrance into the bay. So at high tide, all that water has to flow through that one entrance, and they just put turbines down there. So it turns the turbines as the tide comes in. That whole bay fills up, 30 feet full of water. Well, then low tide, it all starts draining back out. Well, it has to go right back to that same gateway and turns the turbines again. So they get water when it comes, they get electricity when it comes in, they get electricity when it goes back out. So that's a new one. Also, another one they're doing is wave and current. So in the ocean, there's ocean currents that never stop, and so they've started doing current where they just basically put turbines down there and anchor them in the ocean, and as the current flows through the turbine, it turns the turbine, therefore generates power. And then wave. And the ocean rarely is calm, so it always has waves, and the up and down motion is a pumping action, and they hook it up to a motor some way, and it turns a turbine, which creates electricity. So they're doing a lot more with the ocean, and even in rivers and stuff, little mini electric plants that they've created. So it's pretty cool. Geothermal is just using the Earth's natural heat. So they pump water down into the Earth's crust near lava. And then, of course, that will turn that into steam and vapor, and they'll push it back up, and they use those steams to turn turbines. The water chills, it recondenses from steam, they pump it back down, and just keep cycling it through. So that's geothermal. Of course, the danger with geothermal, why you don't hear a ton about that, is you need to be close to where the molten lava is close to the Earth's top of the Earth's crust, which is like where you have volcanoes, which then you have seismic activities and everything. It's usually kind of unstable area. So it's hard to justify spending millions of dollars on a plant that could be destroyed. So you don't see a lot of those, but it is one. And there's a whole lot of other geothermal. Basically, in a lot of ways, our building is heated by geothermal. We have pipes that go way down into the ground and just use the Earth's natural heat to heat up those pipes, and then they blow that water air back through. So lots of different types of geothermal being used. Obviously, wind energy. Heck, go to West Texas, start traveling up north to Oklahoma from here, and you see tons of these things. Or if you, and I went fishing down on the Gulf, and we did some night fishing, and it was just surprising looking back at the back towards land, and it was just a sea of red flashing dots.
Yes, I see that, like, I've seen
Yeah.
like in Oklahoma, there's like this, and when you're driving to Oklahoma on 35, there's like this bluff, like, kind of area that goes down. It slopes up and then it kind of slopes down. If you're up there,
Yeah, so there's a lot of these out there. Just don't buy into the idea that it's green energy. Just do a little research and find out, how green they are. And take a look at some of the early wind farms out in California and what they look like now, and how green the companies took care of them. But anyways, it is inexhaustible. There's always wind blowing. In fact, I think the third windiest city in the United States is Abilene, Texas. And that's why when you head out West Texas, you start seeing a ton of these windmills, is because there's almost always a constant wind out in there. I think the windiest city is Chicago, I believe, is the windiest city. Then you got solar. You have your just natural solar panels and solar arrays. I think Tesla's come up with their own shingle for your house, like what's on your house roof. It actually ends up being a solar panel, so it makes your whole roof a giant solar panel. There's a couple other companies that came out with those a while back. Like the International Space Station gets some of its power from solar. I think quite a lot of it actually from solar, and that's why you see most of our satellites always have these large panels like this, because they're collecting solar power. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think the space station also has a nuclear power plant on it. And then there's also a different type of solar where you usually have to large area. And really, with a solar farm, you have to have a pretty large area anyways. But they take mirrors and focus all the mirrors to reflect the sun at the top of this tower right here. Now, what do you think happens at the top of that tower? It gets really hot. What do you think is at the top of that tower? A big vat of water. And so what happens when the water gets really hot? Forms steam, which creates pressure, which then they shoot that through a turbine, which turns the generator. So it's still boiling water is what we're doing. I always think it's kind of funny with all of our technology. Our power production mainly consists of boiled water to create steam to turn a turbine, which turns a generator. So, yeah, that's it. So that's the end of the presentation. I'll replace this one since it didn't show the PowerPoint. And then here's just the actual PowerPoint that I just went over. Here's a list, and this is not a complete list, but at least it gives you kind of a starting point when you're wanting to look at different types of energy sources that you might be interested in doing your presentation on. So I'm going to go over what your presentation will be. That way you can know what you're kind of doing. You're going to create a Google slide. There's the grading rubric at the bottom. I'll go over that real quickly at the end. Your first slide will be your title slide, and that gives you everything that needs to be on your title slide. Slides 2 and 3, that's the required information, which is right down here, presentation content. So I'll go over that in a second. You must have 3 or more sources to get your information from. So you have to have at least 3 sources cited. Okay. You can use more than 2 to 3 slides to get this information. Okay, but it has to be at least slide 2 and 3, at least 2 slides. You can use more than 2 slides, but it has to be at least slide 2 and 3. And then your last slide will be your reference slide using MLA format, just like your English classes require you to. And if you don't know it, if you Google create MLA format from a website, there's lots of websites where you can just copy your website in there and it will put it into MLA format for you. And then you can just put it in your reference slide. Your presentation can be more than 4 slides, but it has to be at least 4 slides. So it has to at least have these 4. This information here can be more than just 2 slides. You can use 3 or 4 slides. So you can have a 6 or 7 slide presentation. However, your presentation should take at least 1 minute. So if 4 slides doesn't take 1 minute for you to go through, you may want to add some more information. It can't be over 3 minutes. At 3 minutes, I will shut you off, whether you're done or not. Okay, your presentation will end. So you're going to need to kind of practice it a little bit and check it out. This is what you have to have in your presentation. You have to identify as an energy source classified as non-renewable, renewable, or inexhaustible. How's the energy source made usable? So, like in a solar panel, how does the sun shining on a material make electricity? How do we make electricity from water flowing through a turbine, in a dam, things like that. So, how are we taking our energy source? How do we get electricity from coal or oil or natural gas? So, what are the infrastructure requirements for utilizing this energy source? Infrastructure is like, how are we getting this energy? Like coal. One, part of your infrastructure for coal is you've got to get the coal, whether that's open pit mining or shaft mining, but you have to get the coal. So that's part of the infrastructure you need. If you're going to do hydroelectric, you've got to have a river. You can't just build a dam in the middle of a field and hope to have hydroelectric. It's just not going to happen. And not only do you need a river, you need a river that you can dam and not flood, 10,000 acres. It'd be better to be in like a ravine or that's why like some of our largest dams are on like the Colorado River and stuff like that. It's because it's in the deep gorge, and so it's easy to dam, and it just flooded that gorge. So so what's the infrastructure, and then how do we get to it? What energy technology, what emerging technology will make the energy source safer, more usable, and effective, cleaner, etc. There's so many things changing on a lot of this, a lot of these different energy sources. And so do some research, find out what's coming, what's being developed to make it better. And then under each image, so you should have some images. Obviously, just cite the domain name. So like if you found an image, now nothing should be Google. Okay, Google is getting that image from somewhere. Google did not create and take pictures of all images you see on Google Images. It's just, Google is a search site. It found that from a website. So go to the original site. So let's say it was off of, this looks like nasa.gov and whatever it was. On the picture, you would not put this whole long website. You would just put the domain name, www.nasa.gov. In your reference slide, you would put the whole long thing in an MLA format, okay? But for the picture that you're using on your slide presentation, you would just put the domain name. So I shouldn't see these long names like this for your pictures, okay? Make sure your references are where you're getting your information must be more than 2 sources, which is 3 or more. Create a reference slide with MLA citations and of where all your information is gathered. Okay, and here's just a checklist, and I'll go more over this when you get closer to doing your presentation, talking about have you planned to how to enhance your statements. So in other words, you don't want to have a paragraph on your slide. You should have a bullet on your slide, and then you should expand on that information, being the expert of that energy source. Practice it. If you examine every sentence or phrase to make sure that it can't be made into a word or phrase that can be elaborated on verbally. So instead of typing it out, make it a bullet point, make it a short phrase, and then you elaborate on the information. Maintain eye contact. So don't be staring at the screen. Talk to your audience. Did you make sure you chose a font? You need a font size of 28 to 32 is typical for a presentation. And it goes through, text is large, easy to read, bullets and other methods to distinguish between points. Does your presentation stand out? Seem creative? Trust me, if you are bored with your presentation, we will be bored listening to it. So try to make it interesting. Think about your audience, which is your fellow students, is your main audience. I'm only one person in your audience. Your students are the other 90% of the people in the classroom. So, try to make it interesting. Do you have pictures, graphics, or animations that, and this is the key word, enhance your presentation? If you have Garfield running across your screen every slide, and you're talking about hydroelectric, Garfield has nothing to do with hydroelectric. It does not enhance. In fact, it's a distraction, and you'll lose points because of it. So, find things that enhance your presentation. Did you include the reference notes? You know, once again, are you happy with what you've made? You know, is it something that you're kind of proud of? And is it going to be something that's going to be slightly interesting so people could actually maybe learn something? You know, there's a thought. So, you know, trust me, if you're bored with it and you don't want to do it, we really probably won't want to listen to it either. Okay. And then if you get questions, obviously ask me. You'll submit this presentation here, and so I'll grade your presentation as a PowerPoint, and then you'll be graded as a presentation. So you'll get 2 grades off of this. One is just your PowerPoint that you submit, or your Google Slides, not PowerPoint, Google Slides, and the other is the actual presentation you'll do in front of your students in the class. Okay? So that's kind of where we're heading with this, and oh, the rubric down here at the bottom, you can see, you know, your slide is 10 points, energy source classification is another 10 points, how it's made usable is 15 points, your infrastructure, how we get it from whatever raw material it is to whatever it's going to be used as, and then how we get it to our, you know, homes, businesses, industry. That's another 10 points. Emerging technologies is 15 points, so I'm putting a lot more weight there. You got your images cited, you have your reference slide, you have 4 more slides, and it says duration here. I'll have to take that one off. I was using the same rubric, and so I'll take those 10 points off and probably throw them up into these here. So I need to update that because there is no duration. This is just the PowerPoint being graded. So that's the rubric. So once again, this video here will be replaced with the one I just made right now. And then here's the PowerPoint presentation. And then here's the list of energy sources that you could do some research after you finish the assignment that's due today.